There's a crackle on the radio, a story to be told about banjos on the hillside and voices paved in gold. Got a cold glass bottle, drop some peanuts in the coat, and I'm sitting on the front porch hanging on every note. The Front Porch Podcast, singing times gone by, with fiddle strings and heartache and the reasons why. We keep this music living, never let it fade so fast. Raise a toast to the legends on the Front Porch Podcast.
Hi there, everybody. Good evening to you. How are you doing? This is your old pal, Kevin. This is the Country Music Time Machine. And, of course, this is the thing we call the Front Porch Podcast, where we talk about some of the legends of country music history. Tonight, we're featuring a great legend, Waylon Jennings. Any Waylon Jennings fans out there? I raise my hand. Yes, I am. Glad to have you along. You know the rules here on the Front Porch Podcast. Tune in, chime in, and take the roll. I want to know who you are, and I want to know where you're tuning in from. We do it every week. It's like in the old days of school, you know, when we did the roll call in America, we did the national anthem. We're not doing the national anthem because you don't want to hear me sing, but I want to know who you are and where you're dialed in from so we can just touch base and know who's watching us. Because last week we had a lot of folks watching us from all over the U.S., Canada, Central America, Europe, and even on the recorded stuff all over the world. So that was cool. So I do want to know where you're dialed in from as I look at the screen here and pick up the listeners and viewers. Maria Brown's out there, as she always is. She's one of the first ones always tuned in. Good evening, Kevin. I hope you had a wonderful week. Great show for my birthday yesterday. Watching from New Jersey. Happy belated birthday to you, Maria Brown. We got Katie. Katie is saying, hey, y'all, from Alaska. Katie, you got to let us know. Is it cool today in Alaska? It's not very cool. It's sort of rainy today in Tennessee. Actually, I'm going to show you a video of what it's like right now on the front porch. We're not on the front porch. As you can tell, I don't have a fireplace on my front porch. We're inside because of this. Not much rain all week long, but it returned today. So, So, Katie, let me know what the weather is like in Alaska. Hopefully it's cooler than it is in Tennessee. Actually, a little bit cooler today because of the rain. But, DDRR says howdy and happy belated birthday to Maria. Old J-Cat, always tuned in from Portland, Oregon. I'll be talking about J-Cat in a little bit because we had some exchanges of comments where I will be saying the B word. Katie also says, happy birthday, Maria, belated. Joshua John, our historian, is up in upstate New York. Jeff Guitars is saying, Waylon, thumbs up, thumbs up. Sometimes I cannot see these. Like the other day, someone in Great Britain was watching, and all I saw was GB, and I was like, what does GB mean? But when I watched the replay of the podcast, it was actually the flag. So sometimes I don't see all the things there. So go figure. All right, we got more. We got John Gatos from Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Michael Murphy. I hadn't heard from Michael in a while. Michael Murphy, Lookenbach, Texas. Mama, don't let your babies grow up and be cowboys. They rock. You better believe they rock. That's real country, folks. And some of us really miss the real country around the world. Katie says, not really a lot of smoke. Wow. Somebody's burning something in Alaska. One of these days, I'm going to go to Alaska because Alaska looks so beautiful. Becky Croman Johnson says, first time here from New Mexico. Becky, thank you so much for tuning in. I don't know what spurred you to tune in, if YouTube sent something to you or you're just browsing around. We appreciate all of you. I appreciate the regulars that come in all the time, and I appreciate you, Becky. Always good to have new folks. We have other folks in New Mexico to watch too, but I'm glad you're watching That's for sure. Let me scroll back up here before I lose my place because we got a lot of folks tuned in tonight. Rita Harris says, good evening, Kevin. Hope you're having cooler weather than us. It's Rita in New Jersey, of course. Waylon was one of the greatest singers of all time. Yes, you'll probably hear me repeat this. We need more Waylon Jennings in country music today. Not the drugged up part of Waylon Jennings, but the good country singer and songwriter, Waylon Jennings. Bruce Beasley is saying, hey, from New Zealand, nice, cool, usury winter's day. That's cool, Bruce. Can you send some of your coolness to America? A lot of folks are freaking out because they think the world is coming to an end because global warming has returned. I don't know, as a little boy, I always remember it being hot, so it's hot again this summer in the United States of America. Bruce, thank you so much. Say howdy to all your friends in New Zealand. Tell them about us. We want to tune in, I am a fan of Shane Van Gisbergen, the incredible NASCAR driver, especially on road courses. So thank you so much, Bruce. Michael Murphy says, yes, sir, you got it, man. William May says, good evening, everyone, from Chapel Hill, North Carolina, not Chapel Hill, Tennessee, which is just down the road from me. DDR said, welcome. Becky, see, Becky, they just love you to have you here. Katie says they have wildfires going on and had a 7.2 earthquake. I feel for you. I've been in earthquakes before. When I was working for Uncle Sam in Nicaragua, I slept outside quite often because I was afraid my house was going to fall on my head because the earth was always shaking in Nicaragua. Glad to have you folks along. Got the Coke and peanuts. I'm going to talk a little bit about Coke and peanuts a little bit later, but let me take a sip. So the Coke and peanuts are in hand. Let's bring up the Country Music Time Machine Front Porch Podcast news update. Let's talk about some news and viewers and comments and a few people getting pissed off at Kevin during the week, and I'll tell you about that. Some new people getting pissed off as well, not only just the regulars that get pissed off. All right, the Country Music Time Machine crew members of the week. A salute going out to these folks because according to YouTube, they were incredibly actively engaged into everything on the Country Music Time Machine channel. We got P. Smith. We got Sir Mojo, also known as, I guess, the Incredible Hulk there. Marcy Bells and K.A.S. And it says her handle there is Hillbilly Gal. She's got a cool cat on her profile picture there. All right, let's tune into some comments of the week. And here's where sometimes on the Front Porch Podcast it gets a little crazy because some people say some things that just blow my mind about country music history, and quite often they'll pull politics into it. So it makes us all open our minds to different viewpoints. This is from Bill Nolte. He says, maybe, and this is coming from the Crazy Country Lyrics episode I did a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to do another one because a lot of folks are tuned into that one because there's a lot of country songs with some freaky lyrics. And there was one called Maybe I Mean Yes, and Bill is saying it was a great song. The fact Snowflakes killed it in 1991 shows the offended class has been around longer than many think. Of course, Try That in a Small Town shows how far the offended class has succeeded in making their being offended mainstream. I think we've always been offended by something. I guess it's just more magnified now because of the internet and all the crap on social media that I'll be covering pretty soon. Another comment here. This is from Jeep Animal. I really need some snowflakes in my life right now, actually, because it's so hot. Maybe it could cool down this global warming. Really, snowflakes got to stop listening to country, even this fake country we got now. Several artists not included. They still sing real country, but if it's club music, it ain't country. Country is bar music, not club music. And if you don't know the difference, ... Cheap Animal, I agree with you about country music. There's some stuff out there that I listen to and I say, what in the heck did I just hear? That was a rock or rap song. Anyway, also, I had someone chime in. I probably recorded this episode 2 years ago, and all the episodes where it starts with like 1980 in country music history, 1997 in country music history. They're 6-minute episodes. And it's just mainly a recap of what happened that year in country music history with a little tidbit of the news and sometimes how it affects music and everything. Well, I really upset Ken Dacey. I can't believe the history of country music can upset people, but Ken Dacey was upset. He says, it's supposed to be about country music, and they barely touched George Jones. He stopped loving her today. Well, Ken, there's no they around here. It's just me doing all this stuff. So, not making any money to have a team or anything like that. Song of the Year in 80 and 81, and the best country song ever recorded, Learn What You're Doing. Well, Ken, I've covered old George Jones a lot. We miss George Jones. We love George Jones, and we need more George Jones in the world right now in country music. But that's just a snapshot of 1980. I couldn't take 5 minutes talking about the old possum, but please tune into my other stuff and you'll hear the possum. And we even featured the possum here on the Front Porch Podcast one time. Of course, I respond to Ken, sort of trying to be nice, but sort of sarcastically saying, thanks for the kind words, Ken. I will work harder next time. All right. Thank you, Ken. All right. Also, I released an episode about a recap, just a total recap of the 70s in country music a couple of weeks ago. And Hog 69 Head, these are great handles. Is that what they call them on YouTube, handles? Or is that something I got left over from CB McCall and Convoy? I don't know. The garbage they call country music is nothing like the music of the 70s. I agree with you in that sense, in many ways. But historically, if you look at the 1970s, there are a lot of similarities today because there were some people making country music like John Denver and Olivia Newton-John that were not considered by some to be country music singers, and it caused a stir. So some things in history repeat itself. And speaking of the lovely Olivia Newton-John, let me tell you, she was the first person I saw on TV that I fell in love with as an 8-year-old boy. I was in love with Olivia Newton-John. A beautiful woman, just a beautiful voice. And of course, J-Cat jumps in and says, shut your mouth, Kevin. Olivia Newton-John could sing. Beyonce can't. Here is where I disagree. I think Beyonce can sing. I think she has a good voice. And she's made a gazillion dollars in pop music and that type of music for years. She has just decided not to sing country music, even though she's getting country music awards, which is confusing for folks with limited abilities like me. But as I respond to J-Cat, he says, I think Beyonce can, I think she can sing, plenty of talent. She just isn't singing country. And J-Cat comes back and says, Kevin, I'll buy you a Coke if you can make it a week without saying the B word. I don't think that's possible, but I do have some breaking news. Let me find that breaking news slide here. Here we go. All right. Trump announces Mexican Coke will now be made in America. Yes, this Mexican Coke, $3 a bottle. Well, it's not really Mexican Coke. It's Coke, but the Mexicans are smarter than us. When they make Coke, they put real frickin' sugar in it, and they put it in a glass bottle. And I think in Mexico, they recycle the bottles. I know southern Mexico used to, but here, I don't think I can return this bottle anywhere. So the magic of Coke and peanuts is not just the sugar, the cane sugar in the Coke and the peanuts, of course, but it is the bottle. So if it comes back and they start using real sugar, according to President Trump, he's commanded the Coca-Cola company to do that. Coca-Cola has not confirmed they're going to do that. I hope they do. We're going to have some good Coke with real sugar, not that fake crap in there. So yeah, I'm excited about that. If it does happen, don't know if it will, but we need good Coke. And Michael says that's what Chipotle charges, $3. $3 for a bottle of Coke? That's freaking crazy, And I got it here I think I got it at Kroger here in Tennessee. It's too much for a bottle of Coke. I remember when I would get a bottle of Coke in Belize, and sometimes I'd cross over the border into Mexico to eat some tacos. I get a bottle of Coke there, and it was about 99 cents US that I remember. So it gets triple charged when it gets shipped into the US when we can make the own stuff ourselves. So JCat saying they did. Maybe Coke has confirmed that. I hope they do. Maybe Coke can also sponsor this Country Music Time Machine channel, and I could make some money. Also got Julian Santagida. Good to be able to join your live stream, Kevin. I think Julian is up in Canada, where it may be just a tiny bit cooler. All right, let's keep talking about Beyonce as JCat just covers his ears when I say the B word. Here's a comment from Jason Zishon. Beyonce was born country and black people invented country music. Look it up. Well, Jason, I have looked it up many times, and I've studied and I've read a lot of books about this, and I've taken input from a lot of people inside the country music industry in Nashville, a lot of the old timers and other historians, and I do not agree with what you're saying. And I'm just going to read verbatim what I responded to him on the screen. Maybe that way I won't get out of hand. I say I have looked it up, and I've studied it extensively. Country music was imported to the U.S. from Europe, and we adopted some styles and music instruments from them. We also adopted instruments and styles from the blacks who were slaves in America during that time. Country music is an infusion of multiple instruments and styles from many parts of the world. To say black people invented country music would be incorrect. To say European settlers invented it would also be incorrect. It's just an infusion of styles and instruments from long ago. Americans took it to a whole new level starting in the late 20s, and all races were part of that growth. And just a little side comment on that. We can debate about this forever, but you can't ignore the fact that, especially in the 20s and 30s, there were many influential black artists, musicians, composers who helped to make country music what it was, and they didn't get the credit they deserved. That should all never be forgotten. And also, it should never be forgotten, and hardly anybody says this, one of the reasons country music is big as in the U.S. now, as it is because of Mexico. Because in the early 20s, or the late 20s, 30s, early 40s, radio stations were not playing country music. So the country music guys from Nashville went down to Mexico to the border and put up these big freaking tower transmitters and started blasting country music into the U.S. 100,000 watt probably, or I don't know if you can go more than that, but 100,000 watts, pretty massive. And country music came into the U.S. So you can't say Mexicans invented it. You can't say blacks did, whites did, Europeans did. Everybody got their hand in that magical mix of country music, and I'm glad they did. All right, let's bring up another clip here as I continue talking about JCat, and I'm not even paying him to talk about him. Last week, he had a challenge for us about a song he was trying to figure out, about a truck driver song. I believe in the 70s, two drivers changing their tire on the truck. One of them has a broken arm. When he asked how he got the broken arm, he said he got a hold of a Playboy and broke his arm filling out all those order forms. As soon as I got off the air last Saturday, the answer came in, and it was almost simultaneously from Nicole and Joshua. And Nicole says, check out The Gear Jammer and The Hobo by Red Savine. For the song you mentioned, the Front Porch Podcast, I listened to it. It fits the song's description. It sure does. And that's a song that I didn't even know. I didn't play it on the radio back when I worked on the radio. But just as a side note, I know, and some of you may not remember this, but about a year ago, I released an episode giving a preview of upcoming specials. And one of those specials on that episode was a series about truck driving songs. And if you noticed, I never released a truck driving song episode. I even recorded it. One thing led to another, and I couldn't get the episode together and get it out. So I'm thinking about doing that. So if you guys had good ideas about truck driving songs like Red Savine, I can think of Alabama had a good truck driving, hard working song, Dan Seals had Big Wheels in the Moonlight. There are a bunch of them out there. C.W. McCall, Convoy. If you can think of good ones to plug in my mind that are important to country music history, let me know, because I'm going to be working on that. Don't know when I'll get it to come out, but it'll come out. All right, here's another one. Let's start our special segment on crap on social media. This one's coming from Classic Country Echoes. Kevin from Country Music Time Machine caught on Kiss Cam with Beyonce. Now, I'm upsetting J-Cat even more now because I'm caught on the Kiss Cam. I guess that was the thing at a Coldplay concert a couple of days ago. A big wig CEO was stepping out on his wife, and Coldplay caught him on camera, and he was embarrassed. No, folks, it amazes me that what some people believe on social media. If I put this out, somebody would probably think it's real, but it's not. No, that's not Jay-Z in the background clapping because it looks like Beyonce is sitting on my lap. It's fake. It's crap, but I thought that'd be fun, since I don't really talk bad about Beyonce. I think she's beautiful and talented. I just don't think she's singing country music, and that upset some Beyonce fans. Sorry about that. I'm a country boy. What do you expect? But let's go to some real fake crap. The one with me and Beyonce was fake crap. This is more real fake crap on social media. And the most fakest crap I really find is on Facebook. Even though we get about 6 to 10 million views a month on Facebook. We got a lot of folks out there. All you folks watching on Facebook, I do love you, but please be careful. Don't fall for this junk I have here on my computer screen that's on the screen here now. It is from some stupid channel called Classic Country Echoes. If you tuned in last week, I showed you the same story, but it was Blake Shelton sitting at the grave of Toby Keith singing a song. And here they have AI'd Willie Nelson into Toby Keith's funeral plot there. But come on. Toby Keith was a rich man. He doesn't have a tiny little grave marker like that. And I'm not sure if Toby had a U.S. flag on his casket, but the U.S. flag is usually reserved for those who have served in the U.S. military. But at least in this fake junk, Willie did upgrade and got him a folding seat to play his guitar on there beside Toby's supposed grave, because Blake Shelton was sitting on the corner of a box getting hemorrhoids probably on the other fake stuff. But the amazing thing about it, look at the bottom of the post. 30,000 people liked it or loved it. 2.5 thousand comments, almost 3,000 shares of a totally fake post. And guess what, folks? Classic Country Echoes is making money on that junk and taking advantage of people. And they also sometimes have people hanging out in the chat section and baiting people by with money schemes too. So when I see these, I like to bring them up because I just don't like the fake crap, especially when it concerns country music and I know it's total junk. I don't like it. All right, here's something else. Now, if you're a Reba McEntire fan, please, I don't know, sit down and take a deep breath when I start talking about this. I saw this morning. Give you a little background on this. PBS, President Trump says he's canceling PBS. He's doing away with it. No more PBS. Well, Reba McEntire stepped out and spoke out against it. There's a video. I'm not playing the video, but where Reba is fighting for the survival of PBS. Now, I'm not a huge viewer of PBS. Neither when I was a child. I was watching Sanford and Son and the Andy Griffith Show reruns after school. I wasn't totally tuned into PBS or Sesame Street. But here, Reba is upset and crying and defending PBS and hoping they will not be defunded. Here's my take on this. And this is coming from a guy, and PBS doesn't have a lot of connection to country music. Yeah, we do have Austin City Limits, a great show for many years. I don't know what other country music connections we had, but it's not loads of country music. But PBS, especially in the last few years, has been called out for their political bias in their news reporting. And so has Fox News, and so has CNN, so has just about everybody. Here's the problem. When government funded money, taxpayer money is going into things like that, it does need to be checked. Now, I worked for 24 years for the U.S. government up until a few months ago. And, there have been some layoffs in the federal government. And in a sense, if PBS gets canceled, there'll be layoffs at PBS, if not already. I don't know. But I remember 70s and the 80s, even the 90s, there were layoffs in my town of factory workers. Now, everybody's crying about government workers, and I do cry for them too, and I feel for them and their families. But layoffs is a part of life. Adjusting a budget is a part of life. I wish there was some way to keep PBS going, but possibly make it objective and fair to all political sides. It should be reflecting the United States of America, not just a specific political spectrum. So if there could be some guarantee that it could be equal, fair with their broadcasting, reporting, it would be cool. So Reba does take a chance stepping out there. And when you, country artists, pop artists, whatever, when you start talking about politics, you're going to piss people off. And I'm sure I'm going to piss somebody off with what I just said. Do I want PBS to go away? No. I want PBS to be fair and objective. I want Fox News and CNN to be that way too. I don't know if that will ever happen. So, just my 2 cents. Let me bring up DDR. PBS could continue if they raise their own money. They're not just going to get taxpayer money anymore. Well, if that's the case, I think they've always tried to raise their own money. And if they want to, they can, I guess. But I do question if it will be, stamped by the U.S. government as being, because when you say public broadcast system, I think of in the radio days, we had the emergency activation system or the emergency broadcast system. It was like a government-owned, overseen by the U.S. government. They may have to change their name. Is it really? I just want some news source, whether it's PBS, CNN, or Fox News. Just tell the news, give both sides of the story, and stop talking with your opinion. But will they ever do that? I don't know. I want to let Corey Beaver tune in too. Good evening. He says, I'm late. I just arrived at my company's terminal in Lamar's, Iowa. Corey's all over the country. He can get the pulse of everything, I guess. Also remembering another legend, Lefty Frizzell. He passed away 50 years ago today. Wow. 50 years ago today. We need more lefties and Waylons. Sadly, so many of the artists I feature are passed away. But thank you for chiming in with us, Corey. And speaking of passing away, another sad one to bring up. I don't know if you guys heard about this. Helen Cornelius. She really got big with Jim Ed when they released some great songs. Best remembered for a series of hit duets with Jim Ed Brown, many which reached the U.S. country singles top 10 chart during the late 70s and early 80s. Helen Cornelius died at the age of 83. So very sad there. Thoughts go out to the family. And they made some great music together, and we will surely miss them. Coming back to the screen to suck on some more of this Mexican Coke and peanuts. William May says PBS can start running commercials to stay afloat. I guess that's a possibility. I just would think maybe they need to change their name if they go that route, But it's just a thought, And I don't know, is Austin City Limits still on PBS? I don't know. I don't get regular TV, so I couldn't even answer that question. So the only time I really watched PBS in the past was for Austin City Limits, and usually Willie Nelson was on there. All right, the reason we are here tonight is to honor and remember and talk about the country great Waylon Jennings. Oh, man. You know, I've said it and I'll say it again. We need more Waylon Jennings in country music today. We got a few. We got a few that can pull a Waylon, that are Waylon-esque, if I can use that term. But boy, we miss Waylon. His full name, Waylon Arnold Jennings, if you didn't know that. But he had some other names he often used, often in song as well. Hoss, Chief, Watasha, Waymore, born June 15th, 1937. Does that make Waylon a Gemini like me? I was born June 2nd. So maybe we're Geminis. Born in Littlefield, Texas. I think that's West Texas, if I'm not mistaken, excuse me. You know what Coke and Peanuts does. Population of Littlefield, Texas, 5,943. Another one of those small towns bringing up country music legends. That is cool. All right, let's keep rolling talking about old Waylon Jennings. He was born dirt poor. He's part Cherokee and part Comanche in his blood. They were very poor, as was Johnny Cash, George Jones. That poverty influenced their country music and their songwriting and their singing and the soul of what they did, and it came out. Nowadays, maybe not as many people are being born dirt poor like that, and they can't make as good country music. I don't know. But he was born a pretty poor fella, and his family really, really struggled. And play a clip now from old Waylon, and I want to give a shout out and remember Ralph Emery. Ralph Emery is probably one of the 5 people I know that are just legendary country music interviewers. They did great interviews with country music legends. And a lot of the clips I'm going to be playing tonight are from Ralph Emery. And I love and miss Ralph Emery. But in this clip from Waylon, he talks about, referencing how poor they were and how hard his dad had to work to put bread on the table.
He was working for $1 a day, and he was working sun up to sundown. Before sun up, he milked, it was over 20 head of cattle, and when he came in the evening, he had a lot of work to do. And I saw my dad. I mean, he was the kindest man you ever met, and he did. He had his head in his hands. He was crying.
Yep, a tough time to grow up like that. But I really think when you grow up poor and not as privileged as kids are today, it instills a different value in you. And a lot of kids, when I speak to my younger kids and I explain this to them, they don't understand it. They think you're a freak from another planet. But it does. And eventually, as they mature, they understand it more. But it's an important part of growing up. And it was an important part of the influence of Waylon Jennings. Started playing guitar at the age of 8. And like a few other country legends, like me, he was a DJ at radio stations. That was one of his first real jobs, not on the farm, was at radio stations. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the bottom line was he was born country. His early influences, he had a bunch of them, were Bob Wills, Hank Williams, and Elvis, which may make sense a little later on when I talk about Buddy Holly. But he was born a country singer. And here's Waylon talking more about that.
I have tried to find a time in my life that I thought, well, I want to be a country singer. And I just can't find a place. I was born one. That was something I was born with. Music's always been one of the most important things in my whole life, as it is in most of the people that come from West Texas. Because I think it was a kind of a release. Music was a big release for people who lived there, because we all worked hard all week long. And on Sunday, we'd go to church, and Sunday afternoon, they'd have what they call, we get little get-togethers, and somebody played guitar, somebody played fiddle, or somebody played piano. So I was around music all my life.
Could you imagine that, though, going to church with Waylon Jennings and then afterwards hearing Waylon Jennings pick a guitar? I've had a few of those instances in my life, being with people before they were famous. I'll mention 2 different reasons. One is Shania Twain, and the other one is Billy Ray Cyrus. And with Shania, I was like, yeah, she's going to be something. If the right buttons are pushed, she's going to be a superstar. I didn't really even think about that with Billy Ray Cyrus, but Billy Ray Cyrus turned out to be pretty big, as his daughter did. But could you imagine being in the presence of Waylon Jennings at that age and exposed to his music? Just incredible, incredible stuff. After dropping out of high school, he worked as a truck driver for a lumber company. And this one fact spurred something as I was studying it, Waylon, this week, spurred something into me. As I read these bios of a lot of these country singers and these country legends, I often find data about what they did before they were big. And it inspired me to do an episode about the regular jobs of country stars. And I've already written the episode. I hadn't recorded it yet, but it may come out soon. And some of these jobs will blow your mind. But Waylon was a truck driver for a lumber company before all the connections came together and he became a country, well, not really first. He wasn't at first a country singer. He was a guitar player in a rock band, or a rock band that had sort of country influence. But he was a truck driver for a lumber company at first. But during that period, he met his pal, Buddy Holly, at a restaurant. And you cannot tell the story of Waylon Jennings without telling the story of Buddy Holly. They are interconnected. They are influenced. And what happens in history with Buddy Holly, and if you haven't heard this story, stay tuned. It's some big stuff. It's very important because it changed history of music altogether, and it probably changed the history for Waylon as well. And we'll get deeper into that as we talk about that. Like I was saying before, from 1956, he worked primarily as a DJ, but back in those days, a lot of the DJs could sing. Unlike in my day, none of us could really sing. Some of us could hardly talk. But he could sing, and he performed on the radio, and a lot of folks were listening to him and enjoying him back then. But back to Buddy Holly and the importance of the legendary Buddy Holly. Buddy chose Waylon as his first artist to produce, and Waylon went on the road with him. Buddy noticed something special in Waylon. They became friends, and Buddy was already big then, making lots of great music and loved in the music industry. And Waylon was a great guitarist and backup vocals primarily at that time with Buddy. So they went on the road together. Now, the road was hard. The road is always hard. Even in today's standards, it's hard. Probably not as hard as it used to be, but it's still hard. Tour bus often broke down. There's one story of one of the members of the band getting frostbite because they could never even heat the bus. So some of the biggest stars of that time were going through crazy stuff like that. And it was a sort of vision of things to come, what was getting ready to happen. And here is where it gets crazy. We all know the story of the day the music died. Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and the Big Bopper died in a plane crash. And what some people know, if you know country music history, you know this. If you love country music and you're not tuned into history that much, you may not know this. But Waylon Jennings, before that plane took off, Waylon Jennings told Buddy Holly, "I hope your plane crashes." And of course, the plane crashed. Now let's tune up this story and get Waylon's side of how this went down.
I remember Buddy sitting there by the door. You know, he sent me to get a couple of hot dogs, and I came back, and he's laughing. And he says, "You're not going with us, huh?" And he said, "Well, I hope your old bus freezes up." And then I said to him, I said, "Yeah, well, I hope your old plane crashes," you know. So that took me a long time to get over that. You know?
But you, both of you were doing it humorously?
Laughing. We both were laughing, yeah. And, of course, this guy at High Pockets I was talking about a while ago, he's the only one that helped me out with that. And what he said, if you could bring Buddy back, would you? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, do it. He said, if you think that you had anything to do with sending him away, then you should be able to bring him back, you know. He had to get it down on that level to work.
Yeah, just sad stuff. Quick shout out to Tasha Miller. She says, hi, this is Tasha. My family's watching you. Watching this while doing my homework. Great, Tasha. You're learning about some history while you're doing your homework. Just stay tuned to your history. Hopefully they're teaching you some good history in your school. And Tasha, thank you so much for tuning in. But back to this. Could you imagine if you said to someone that you really cared about, you know, I hope your plane crashes, and they get on a plane and it crashes? It's a devastating effect. And it affected Waylon for a long time in his life. But the strange thing about this, after Buddy died and Big Bopper and Richie Valens, Waylon continued on the road with the band for about 2 weeks. And the stories were that they wouldn't even pay them anymore. They were just trying to still make the music, and they stopped paying them. And I guess the shock of the time or whatever, they finally said, we just can't do this anymore. And imagine going back on stage after Buddy Holly dies and just attempting to, you know, getting in his footsteps. Almost an impossible thing to do. Well, Waylon put his chin up. He loved music. He wanted to play music. In 1963, Waylon signed with A&M Records, but sadly, not much success with A&M. You know, as it is with many artists, they get turned down, especially on their first few record deals. But we can all thank the wonderful Bobby Bare for Waylon Jennings. There's almost always, influential or instrumental people in the history of country stars. Sometimes one, sometimes two. With Waylon, probably two, with Buddy Holly. But then getting into country music, it was Bobby Bare who opened that door for him. He helped him get a contract with RCA in 65, and eventually those hits started coming. Now, he had some hits in the late 60s, and one of my favorite Waylon Jennings albums, and I love this album cover, is Ladies Love Outlaws. And it's from 1972. Maybe Joshua or Nicole or somebody can tell me this. Is Waylon the original outlaw? Maybe it's the first outlaw reference, could be, because I know the outlaw albums came out later in the decade of the 70s, but that just popped into my brain. I don't know, but that was a great album. I loved it, and I loved that album cover. Ladies Love Outlaws, and you got Waylon there without the beard, and just a little girl there, you know, dressed up in her fancy, you know, Western-style clothes, and I always thought that was a cute album cover. But in November 1976, it became this album, The Outlaws, in 76, became the first country album to be awarded platinum status, platinum certification. And selling a bunch of records, that's what's happening. It was the number one album on the Billboard chart as well. Great stuff. And we all know Waylon from at least one song. I know him for many songs, but Lukenbach, Texas, Back to the Basics of Love with his buddy Willie Nelson there. And what a magical song. What a great song. We love it. That is probably his signature song. Some would say, Mama, Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys. Lukenbach, Texas was just a part of the 70s. It's sort of like that and Mama, Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys put a stamp on the 70s, and people said, this is country music. And it came from good old Waylon Jennings. But it brings up the question, what is country music? We're still trying to answer this question. We were debating this question in the 70s, and boy, with Beyonce and Shaboozey and Post Malone and others creeping into country music, we're still asking this question. What is country music? Here's a clip from Waylon, and his answer might just surprise you.
Country music is not a dress. It's not not particularly a sound or an instrument. It's in here. It's something that I've always said that country music is in the soul of the singer or the soul of the song. You know, my perfect example, you've heard of Roy Acuff. I've always said, now, you could get Roy Acuff and the Smoky Mountain Boys, which is his band, with the fiddles and the guitars and all that, and let them sing Wabash Cannonball, which is an old standard. Well, within modern technology, you can put them on record. Then you take all of the Smoky Mountain Boys off and just leave Roy Acuff on there. And you put Henry Mancini's orchestra. You haven't changed anything. You still have Roy Acuff singing Wabash Cannonball, and that's what country music is.
That's Waylon Jennings telling you what country music is. If Waylon was alive today, I wonder what he would think of today's country music. Some people think some of these old outlaws and country legends would be turning over in their grave. Would they or would they not? I don't know. That's a very hard question to answer. But we can't talk about Waylon's life without talking about Waylon's problem with drugs. Like Johnny Cash, that he roomed with in the 60s for a little while, he had a battle. And a lot of these folks, with possibly the exception of Willie Nelson, their drug battle could have had something to do with their longevity in life. Waylon was not an old man when he died. And I've seen others that were heavy on the drugs back in the day and did not live to be ripe old ages, except for Willie Nelson and probably Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones. There's always exceptions to every rule, I guess. But he lived with Johnny in the mid-'60s, and he later said pills were the artificial energy on which Nashville ran around the clock. That's just, I think, what is that, Ozempic? I think Ozempic is today's drug in the country music industry. There are still country music stars doing drugs out there, believe it or not, but probably more are doing Ozempic than they are doing cocaine. Go figure that. But that's when his bad habit started. And the legend of Waylon Jennings just hits it full time in 1977, arrested by the feds for conspiracy of cocaine possession with an intent to distribute. I think the possession was probably right, spot on. Distribute, I don't know. He probably handed it out to his friends. But the DA tried to bust him in his studio in Nashville, and I guess old Waylon got the wind of it and disposed of the evidence. But yeah, a lot of these country legends had drug problems. Now, here's a clip from Waylon talking about them wild days back when he was doing all those drugs.
Well, if you heard that I've had my wilder days, you're right. I mean, I was probably one of the wildest people you ever met. I did drugs for 21 years. I came here doing drugs, so I don't blame the town or the music for that. I really got into it through stupidity. I really didn't know what it was. I had friends who were doctors who liked to hear me sing, so they gave me things that made me need them to be friends with me, Had that and just some of the other things, like there are some pressures. I was kind of an introverted person in an extroverted business. Well, pills and things like that, they give you a false sense of security and what have you. And you become very uninhibited when you're high and everything. And so I got by with it, and I had already been into it by the time I got here. But that just made it worse. Then is when I had to start taking drugs to keep up.
And that's Waylon telling the story right there. Yeah, just some of them were just totally addicted to drugs. And some country music, pop music, rock music legends died because of their addictions to drugs. But some found inspirations in certain places to stop doing the crazy stuff. And what was Waylon's inspiration? His son, Shooter, helped him get off the drugs. And, what better inspiration than trying to do better for your children? Here's Waylon talking about that Shooter inspiration.
I want you to tell these people about one of the important reasons you got off, and that's the Shooter story. When Shooter was like 3 years old, he tried to imitate your movements.
I didn't think he'd ever seen me do drugs, and but I kept it away from the house, and I never let anybody see me do it, and especially a child. Except I slipped up somewhere because Shooter came through the room and looked at him, and he's doing something. What it is, he had one of those straws, and he was just sniffing as hard as he could, and the only place he could ever known to do something like that, I dropped one out of my pocket or something. And that was the start. You know, I had to get...
Yeah, well, but at least he stopped doing it. And probably it prolonged his life. He still died relatively young, but it probably prolonged his life because, especially the hard drugs Waylon was doing, you can't continually do it for years and years and years and expect your body just to be wonderfully fine with it. It's not. But he got off the drugs and he palled up with his buddies. And I always love the Highwaymen. You're talking about a country music supergroup. I don't see how, in today's day and age, this could be redone. Waylon Jennings, Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, and Chris Christopherson. Man, come on. That is the cream of the crop. When you put those voices together, you've got magic. And for some stupid reason in the 80s, maybe I was just too busy working. I don't know what it was. I never went to a Highwayman concert. It's probably one of the biggest regrets of my country music career is not seeing those guys in person. But there's a story behind the Highwaymen, and Waylon likes to tell his point of view about it. He talks about the bond of the Highwaymen, and that's, I mean, not only the musical harmonies and the songwriting that made them so special, but their bond. And here's Waylon Jennings talking about that.
I think the main connection that Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson, Chris Christopherson, and I have is freedom. You know, I've never tried to change them, and they've never tried to change me. You know, we're individuals, and we like people who are individuals. We like people who do things their own way. We don't like mean people. You know, Johnny Cash and I, our lives have been so parallel, right down to how many children we have, the problems we've had, and he's just one of the most pure friends I've ever had in my life, you know. And these guys are people that I don't care where I'm at or what I'm doing. If I need them, truly need them, they'll be there without question, you know.
And, you know, the sad thing about it, of all those guys, only one is still standing, and that is Willie Nelson. And Willie's in his early 90s now. He's still playing. He's still on the road. But we all know that that's not going to go on forever. And then I think the core legends of country music of my lifetime will be gone, you know. So that will be a sad day. We had some that come after them, but are they the same level of a Waylon, Johnny, Willie, and Chris? I don't know. But what great magic. If you've never heard the Highwaymen and you're new to country music, find a Highwayman album, listen to it on Spotify or here on YouTube or on Facebook or wherever you ingest your music. Listen to them. Very special stuff. But Waylon made a lot of money, got a lot of awards, 16 number one singles, 54 charted albums, 11 of those albums making up number one, 2 Grammy Awards, 4 CMA Awards, which I find that strange in a sense. A legend like that only won 4 CMAs. Something was missing there. He was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2001 and multiple other Hall of Fames, including Songwriters Halls of Fame. But sadly, like I said, Waylon died the day before Valentine's Day, February 13th, 2002. He died in his sleep from complications of diabetes at his home in Chandler, Arizona. And according to J-Cat, I think J-Cat says he went to his grave in Mesa, Arizona. And Waylon was only 64 years old. I mean, I am 57, and it makes me think like Waylon Jennings died just a few years after what I am now. So we lost a lot of these country legends too young and too soon, and that is the case for Waylon Jennings. So what is Waylon's legacy? I mean, we all love him. I just saw one of the comments on the chat area about the good old boys from the Dukes of Hazzard, and I'm happy to be a friend with John Schneider. And the last time I was with John, we were actually talking about Waylon and that song and how fun it was and how special it was and how integral it was to be a part of the Dukes of Hazzard. And it was like Waylon was giving John and Tom and the cast and the producers of the Dukes of Hazzard his blessing for that show. And it was a great show. So he has an incredible legacy out there, songwriting, influence on generations of artists. I wish more artists, the younger artists, would listen to Waylon Jennings, not only to his music, but his songwriting, and reflect on that and make country music like that again. He was an outlaw. Maybe not the sense of the outlaw that Merle Haggard was, because I think that Merle Haggard, even though it wasn't sold as being an outlaw, he was probably the original outlaw because he was actually out on the outliers of the law with being in prison. But he challenged Nashville conventions. He did things his way. He wanted to keep it raw. He wanted to keep it pure. He wanted to keep it the way it was. And because he did that, that gave us songs like Mama, Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys, Lukenbach, Texas. And they were just cultural touchstones for country music, especially in the 70s and 80s. And he enjoyed that freedom of storytelling, and we enjoyed listening to him so much. So what a legend, Waylon Jennings. If you're watching this video and you've never heard him, and there are some people that tune in, I can see their comments saying, I didn't know that about that person. I've never heard their music. Listen to it. Listen to what real country music sounds like, because a lot of the stuff we're getting nowadays are so incredibly pop-infused music or country-spirited music, I don't know what you really want to call it, that you really need to listen to these old guys and gals who made this legendary country music and take their inspiration with you to make country music nowadays. Do you need to copy them? No, you don't need to copy them, but be influenced by them. And we love Waylon Jennings. All right, folks, that's all we got for the Country Music Time Machine and the Front Porch Podcast tonight. I hope you had a good time. Thank you to everyone that has been tuned in. Chime in. You can still chime in about where you're calling in from or where you're viewing from. I'm not on the radio. You're not calling me. But thank you for tuning in. Let's try to be kind to each other, love each other. Until next time, God bless you. And as I always say, let's keep it country right here on the Country Music Time Machine.
There's a crackle on the radio, a story to be told about banjos on the hillside and voices paved in gold. Got a cold glass bottle, drop some peanuts in the coat, and I'm sitting on the front porch hanging on every note. The Front Porch Podcast, singing times gone by, with fiddle strings and heartache and the reasons why. We keep this music living, never let it fade so fast. Raise a toast to the legends on the Front Porch Podcast.